Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into something super interesting today, especially if you're curious about, well, how things actually work behind the scenes with Bittensor.
We're really getting into the nitty-gritty this time.
Right. Like we're talking incentives, the stuff that makes this whole decentralized AI thing tick.
And to guide us, we've got this awesome talk by Mog.
Oh yeah, Mog's the best.
Yeah.
Okay, for anyone just tuning in, Mog's a big deal in the Bittensor world. But what's cool is he didn't start out as some AI genius.
Yeah, he's got a really interesting background.
He was totally into web development, building businesses, all sorts of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Not your typical tech brainiac.
And that's what makes his take on Bittensor so valuable, I think.
Totally. Because, see, Mog gets it. He understands what it takes to build something people actually want to use.
Exactly. Like Bittensor, it's not just about fancy algorithms, right? It's about designing a system that works for the people building on it.
It's got to be rewarding, engaging, almost like, I don't know, designing a game.
Yeah.
You want people hooked.
And Mog, he's proven he can do that.
Oh, for sure. Look at Tostats, that whole network visualization tool he built. Brilliant.
And then there's Corcel, which blew the doors open for developers who want to build their own apps on Bittensor.
Exactly. So we're talking to someone who understands user needs, building successful tools, and now he's sharing his insights on incentives.
Which is perfect because incentives are at the core of how Bittensor motivates its community.
It's like the fuel that keeps everything running.
Right. And Mog kicks off his talk with this really clever analogy about conferences.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. What was it, like how to get people to actually attend?
Exactly. Conferences want to attract attendees, so they offer things like, oh, amazing speakers, opportunities to network, maybe even some cool swag.
The good stuff, right.
It's all about incentives. Those perks, those are the incentives that get people like us to show up.
Okay, so I'm seeing the parallel here.
Yeah.
Bittensor is like the conference, and we're all here for the, I don't know, the knowledge, the potential to be part of something big.
Exactly. We're all here for different reasons, but the incentives are what keep us engaged.
But it's got to be more than just, like, free stuff, right?
Yeah.
Especially with something as ambitious as Bittensor.
You're absolutely right. And Mog, he gets into that. He talks about how simple rewards, they aren't enough, especially for something like Bittensor that's aiming for constant improvement, pushing the boundaries of what AI can do.
They want to keep raising the bar, not just, give everyone a participation trophy.
Exactly. He compares it to evolution in nature, survival of the fittest, where only the strongest, the most adaptable ideas survive.
Only the best of the best. And I think he used the example of GPT-3.
Oh, yeah. GPT-3 is a perfect example.
Because it had this initial boom, right? Everyone was blown away, but then things kind of plateaued for a bit before the latest models came out.
Right. It's like a burst of progress, then things level off, then another burst.
And Bittensor wants to design a system where it's not these bursts, but constant, continuous improvement.
Exactly. They want to build a system where the incentives are so well aligned that the progress never stops.
That's so smart. So how do they actually do that? How do you make sure everyone's constantly pushing the limits?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's where things get really interesting. Mog emphasizes that it's not enough to just reward participation. You have to measure the right things.
Like you can't just reward any activity on the network. It's got to be the stuff that actually matters.
Exactly. You could have a ton of people showing up to a conference, grabbing the free t-shirts, and leaving without actually engaging with the content. That doesn't benefit anyone.
That's like the opposite of what you want.
Right. It's all about incentivizing the actions that actually move the needle, like developing faster, more efficient AI models, finding new ways to apply this technology to real-world problems. That's what Bittensor is all about.
Okay, so moving the needle. I like that. But how do they actually measure that? How do you quantify something like that in the Bittensor world?
That's where it gets really interesting. Mog talks about these refined scoring mechanisms.
Refined, so not just your basic metrics then.
Exactly. He digs deeper. Like, he uses the example of latency, how fast an AI model responds to a request.
Okay, so speed is one factor.
Right. But then there's also processing speed, how efficiently it's crunching data.
And of course, accuracy. Got to make sure those AI models are actually getting things right.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that it can vary a lot depending on the application. So the scoring has to be tailored to what you're trying to achieve.
So it's not one-size-fits-all scoring. It's about understanding the nuances of each situation.
Exactly. It's kind of like grading a test.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Instead of just looking at the final answer, you're evaluating the student's process.
Right. Did they use the most efficient method? Did they show a deeper understanding?
Yes. It's about understanding how they got there, not just the end result.
And that's what Bittensor does with its miners.
Exactly. The miners are the ones doing the heavy lifting, running those AI models, performing the tasks.
They're like the worker bees of the hive mind. But someone's got to keep those bees in check.
Well, for sure. And that's where the validators come in.
Ah, the validators, the overseers of the AI apiary.
I love that analogy. But yeah, think of validators as the judges in a competition. They assign tasks to the miners and evaluate how well they're completed.
Okay, so we've got our miners competing, validators judging, and this refined scoring is how they make sure it's a fair fight.
Exactly. It ensures that everyone's playing by the rules and striving for excellence, not just racking up points.
It's like they're trying to create a system where the cream naturally rises to the top.
Precisely. And this ties back into what Mog was saying about diverse data sources.
Right. Because if everyone's drawing from the same well, you get this echo chamber effect.
Exactly. And that's where Yuma consensus comes into play.
Yuma consensus. That sounds intense.
It is pretty cool. It's basically how Bittensor makes sure the validators are on the same page.
Okay, so it's like a consensus mechanism for the judges.
Exactly. And it all comes down to having skin in the game.
Ah, I've heard that before. So the validators are putting something on the line.
Exactly. They stake their own tokens to participate, and the more they stake, the more weight their vote carries.
So the more invested they are, the more say they have. Makes sense to me.
Right. But here's the really clever part. It's not just about how much a validator stakes. It's also about the level of agreement within the entire network.
So one validator with a ton of tokens can't just railroad everyone else.
Exactly. It's like a built-in system of checks and balances.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. It prevents any one entity from having too much control.
Exactly. It's all about collective decision-making based on consensus among those who have the most to lose.
That's really interesting. And this ties into what Mog was talking about earlier, moving from synthetic to organic problem solving, right?
Yes. He talked about that.
It's like moving from a controlled environment to the real world.
Exactly. Synthetic testing is like training wheels. It's good for learning the ropes, but eventually you got to take them off and ride in the real world.
Where things are messy and unpredictable.
Exactly. And that's what Bittensor is designed to do, handle that complexity.
So how does this all connect to the child keys thing? I'm super curious about that.
Oh, child keys. Now we're getting into the really cutting-edge stuff.
This is where things get futuristic.
Right. It's like something out of a sci-fi novel. Basically, child keys let validators delegate some of their bandwidth and decision-making power.
Delegate. So they're like giving away some of their power.
In a way, yes. They're giving it to promising projects or individuals they believe in.
It's like they're betting on the future of Bittensor.
Exactly. They're nurturing the next generation of innovators.
That's really interesting. So if you're a validator and you see a project with huge potential, you can give them a boost.
Exactly. It's a way to empower those who are just starting out.
It's like investing in startups, but for AI.
I love it. So we've got this complex, interconnected system, but it all seems to be working towards this common goal.
Exactly. It's like building a self-governing society, but for AI. And like any society, you need a way to determine value.
That's a great point. Which brings us to the economic side of things.
Right. How does Bittensor assign value? That's a whole other rabbit hole.
Okay, lay it on me. What's this big change? How's Bittensor going to tackle value?
It's a whole new ball game they're bringing in RAU.
RAU. Rings a bell vaguely. Remind me, what's that stand for again?
It's a mouthful, honestly. But think of it as this system, right, for deciding what's valuable, but it's driven by the market itself.
Okay, so instead of, like we were saying before, a small group making those calls.
Exactly. No more centralized decision-making. RAU flips the script. I'm liking the sound of this already, so how's it work?
Supply and demand, baby. Just like a free market, if an AI model's in high demand, its value goes up.
Because more people want it, so they're willing to pay more for it. Makes sense.
Precisely. It's way more dynamic responsive. Bittensor can actually keep up with how fast things change in the AI world.
It's like the network itself decides what's important. No more top-down control.
Bingo! And that's what Mog was getting at, right? Knowledge is power in the Bittensor world.
The more you know, the better you can navigate this whole system. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like having the inside track. You understand the incentives. You know how value's determined. You're ahead of the game.
So to wrap things up for everyone listening, Bittensor is all about this constant evolution, making sure the right contributions are rewarded.
And with RAU coming soon, we're talking about a completely decentralized way to figure out what's valuable.
It's like they're building the foundation for a whole new kind of internet one, where AI is accessible to everyone.
And where the power lies with the people building and using it, not some big corporation.
Exactly. This is just the beginning, folks. The future of AI is decentralized, and it's looking brighter than ever.
Couldn't have said it better myself.